Who's to gain, who's to lose? You know
Well, I believe, I mean, the tragedy was that it was so, before 9/11 ever happened, they already knew about this peace framework. And they already knew that they could have, the United States would receive no punishments at all or no punishments. They would not face any problems because of the years of support for the sanctions. The Iraqis wanted the sanctions off so badly that they were going to give the United States everything that they could have wanted. So this is even going on before 9/11 happens. And they were going to give them, 1 million American-made automobiles every year. Telecommunications, that would be satellites, phone, TV, the CIA could have been, snooping through all the Middle East phone conversations. It was crazy what they lost. Healthcare, hospital equipment, pharmaceuticals, just on and on, just amazing things. Oil. Yeah, they could have had everything, even oil. And the only group that wasn't going to benefit was the military-industrial complex, because this would have been peace. This would have been a very prosperous peace. Believe me, the CIA was driving a hard bargain. Anything that we could think to add, and I have to say, again, I'm anti-sanctions, so I know that a lot of people would say, well, that's not fair to do to the Iraqis, and I agree with you. I agree with you. But it was what the CIA wanted, and they were going to have every single thing that they could think to get. And they wanted, and at the same time, we all knew that it would have to be tremendous to appease George Bush, because he was out for, the Daddy Bush fantasy, this delusion. It was a delusion. But the one group that was not going to benefit was the military-industrial complex. And they were going to be the big losers in this whole thing. They were not going to be able to have their wars. They were not going to be able to sell their military weapons systems. The $400 billion, we wouldn't need all for this equipment or that equipment. They wouldn't need any of it. And so they were the losers, and they were just too powerful. It's also the Pentagon. It's also the Pentagon. I do not believe that the Pentagon was hit by an airplane. I mean, they're saying all that debris suddenly was magically just removed. There was no airplane there either. So it's, there's still a lot of questions about 9/11 that I cannot answer for you, and I'm sorry. I wish these are good questions you're asking. And it's not like I'm trying to blow you off. There's just some things I don't know. But hopefully I'm going to give you enough new information that you'll be able to, put some more pieces of it. Well, I will tell you that the 9/11 conspiracy is based on something called Project Bojinka. And are you all familiar with Project Bojinka? Okay, Bojinka was designed by Ramzi Youssef, who was the mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center attack. And he conceived that in his grand scheme, 11 airplanes would be hijacked and would strike different targets all over the United States. The World Trade Center would be one, and then they would hit the White House, they'd hit the Justice Department, they'd also hit Chicago, they'd hit Los Angeles, and throughout the whole country there'd be strikes. And the military discovered this when they found, or the CIA discovered this when they arrested Ramzi Youssef in the Philippines in 1995, and they found the blueprint for this 9/11, what became the 9/11 attack, on his computer. Okay, and he called it Project Bojinka. And at that point, the military began to run simulated counter strategies for what you would do if there was an airplane hijacking scenario that was attacking various targets throughout the United States. And one of the targets was the Pentagon. And then the Pentagon said it was too outrageous that nobody would actually attack the Pentagon this way, so maybe they should drop the Pentagon scenario, so they did. But even though they had rehearsed Project Bojinka, on 9/11, on September 10th through September 12th, NORAD was on high alert doing military exercises because allegedly the former Soviet Union, the Russians, were doing their military exercises, so we timed our military exercises allegedly to theirs. And they were supposed to be on heightened alert just in the course of practice. They were supposed to be on heightened alert for any invasion of sovereignty of airspace, sovereign airspace, on those dates. And yet, even though the military was on high alert, they took no action when the airplanes were hijacked, and they didn't scramble. They didn't do any. They broke all of their own protocols.
But weren't they mostly sent up in directions away from the
There you
eastern
go.
seaboard?
Yeah. Yes. And they sent one jet. They turned one jet around and sent it after one fighter to go track
They
down.
were already on drills and exercises that had already taken them out and basically left the eastern seaboard.
Yes.
And this is supposed to be the smartest military in the world, right?
Yeah. There you go.
Any consequences for anybody for not taking the action that they...
And yeah, exactly. Well, it was embarrassment.
Well, putting someone into prison or something like this?
Well, other than me and the guy who was allegedly flying the plane that was involved in the shooting down 93, who they don't want you to know about, who was held in prison for a couple of years at least, and I don't know if he's out or not. I mean, they gave him a real hard time. So, yeah.
Susan, could you remind me again what the sanctions were for in Iraq? And two questions. And then I just wanted to get clear about what you were arrested for.
Good. The sanctions were on to punish Iraq for allegedly having weapons of mass destruction, and they said that they would keep the sanctions on Iraq until all weapons of mass destruction were confirmed to have been destroyed. Now, it appears that they were actually destroyed by the end of 96 or 97, but the United States had an ulterior agenda, which was they were not going to let go of the sanctions until Saddam was out of power. But what had happened was, by the year 2000, while Bill Clinton was still in office, the international loathing for sanctions had become intense. 2 million people had died from sanctions. Between 1.7 million and 2.2 million had died. And the international community was violating the sanctions. The German pilots were and Jordanian pilots were and actually it was coming from all over Europe. Germany was the first, and they had pilots fly humanitarian supplies over the air through sovereign airspace and land at Baghdad airport, and then a whole bunch of other countries followed suit, and they were all like, we're not going to do this. This is wrong. It is immoral. It is a crime against humanity, and we recognize that. And so at that point, the CIA, I wanted to do it, but at that point, the CIA knew that they were losing control of the situation and that they better step in and do something. And I wanted to end the sanctions, so I was glad the pilots were doing this. But the CIA was very, very expedient. It was politically expedient. They were losing control of the situation. They wanted to take back their power. I was arrested for, I was accused of several things. One, I was accused of acting as an unregistered Iraqi agent because I had delivered a letter to my cousin, who was the chief of staff to George Bush, telling him that the war in Iraq would be catastrophic, and begging him and outlining several of the consequences, like democracy would throw power to Islamic fundamentalists, and there would be a rise of terrorist attacks, and the Iraqi people hated the sanctions, and they would hate America for having done all this, and if they could get their hands on America, it would just be a very ugly, brutal occupation, and they'd fight us. That was my letter. I went to jail for that. And they also accused me of they called it unlawful financial transactions. I was accused, I'm not making this up, of allegedly eating 3 lunches, I'm not making this up, 3 lunches with Iraqi diplomats totaling $92.92. We have the receipts. And they called that a felony. I was accused of there were secret charges against me, which we have deduced. We were never allowed to know what they were. See, on the Patriot Act, let me just tell you a little bit, because I think this is a good opportunity to explain. When I was indicted, under the Patriot Act, they're allowed to have secret charges and secret evidence and secret grand jury testimony. This is very much, the Patriot Act is modeled on the pretty much verbatim, in many page upon page, identical to the old communist criminal, let's see, I guess it's the Soviet, let's see, there's a long name for it, the Soviet Criminal Act, which set up the KGB apparatus and allowed people to make make accusations against their neighbors without identifying themselves. And it set up the whole Gulag system. And the Patriot Act is modeled on that Soviet law, the Soviet Criminal Act. And it's, you know, almost verbatim to what that is. So, I mean, this is a really scary, scary law. But I was accused of, like, possibly, in the secret charges, one of the, we believe the secret charges was that I received a book from the Iraqis that was a book on depleted uranium. And that was considered classified because if we were to tell American soldiers about the health risks and the rise of cancer rates and birth defects, then it might demoralize American soldiers. Okay? And another thing was is that Saddam's government tried, I'm not making this up, another secret charge was that we believe, well, because I know what I was doing in the periods when of these, like, different, they'd have a date, and I would know approximately what I was doing on that date. And so another one was that the Iraqis tried to give the Bush administration several $100,000 in campaign contributions so that during the presidential election, because they wanted to show that they wanted to be friends with America. And I was ordered, I had reported that to my defense intelligence handler. He was like, holy shit, you got to tell the Iraqis not to do this. You got to make them not do this. And because it reminded them all of the Asian fundraising crisis under Clinton. And he said, don't they watch C-SPAN? Don't they know they're not supposed to do this? And he said, you go back and you tell them that if we find out they gave money to the Republican Party in this campaign, we're going to bomb them. We're going to, you know, but see, at this point, Iraq had been bombed so many times, you couldn't threaten them with bombing anymore because they'd already been attacked. How are you going to, like, impress on people who, oh, you're going to bomb us again? Okay. Sure. You know. So.
This is kind of a rewind to earlier in your talk.
20 minutes.
But I just wanted to know how you knew that Mohammed Atta was a CIA asset.
That's been very well established. They've admitted that he was a CIA asset.
So could you send me to, like, a reference or something so I might be able to verify that? Can you find something?
I will find a reference for you and give it to these guys and yeah, sure. I'll get you some references on that. But it has been verified that he was. And he received some military training too. Sorry. Yeah. Well, you gotta hear what she did to me. When I was locked up, my boyfriend called her and talked to her producers and said, please, you know, Susan is the cousin of the chief of staff to the president. She covered the Iraqi embassy. She warned about 9/11. She's locked up on a military base on the Patriot Act, and they're refusing to give her a hearing. And she was the chief asset covering Iraqi pre-war intelligence. The government is saying that she's incompetent, and they're saying that that assets were incompetent, and yet she's accused, and he gave her the letter, the Andy Card letter, and said, you know, she wrote this letter, and she turned out it was right on all fronts, and couldn't you please interview her? Couldn't you do a story? Please help us. And she, you know what she did? She said, well, you know, maybe her attorney thinks this is a good strategy. We wouldn't want to upset things for settling the case.